Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Rugby World Cup Weekly, our flagship weekly Rugby World Cup review show. After 5 weekends of thrills and spills, cards and tries, the pool stages came to a frantic and enjoyable end this weekend. Now it's time for the fun stuff. Joining me tonight are returning second cappers in freelance rugby commentator and writer Sam Roberts and podcaster Enda. So welcome back on, gentlemen.
Hello, nice to be here.
Glad to be here.
Always good to have you on. And joining them is a man with more podcast appearances than Bernard Jackman these days. It is spreadsheets guru and Castor aficionado, Huw Griffin. So welcome back, mate.
Thank you, Galen. To explain to our listeners, the joke with Castor there is that you and I exchange messages weekly on how much we hate Castor.
I do not. I tell you the reception that I'm getting from pro Castor people is a difference. I'm just pro Adidas. To pause the pleasantries for a split second, I just want to remind everyone at home again that we have covered Ireland's win over Scotland in an in-depth separate podcast on the channel. So make sure to check that out. And also, we will be changing things up slightly tonight. So instead of just going game by game, we will have a chat about the 7 pool games, but also a bit more of a joined up inspection of the pools themselves now as they've reached their crescendo. So with that in mind, we will kick things off in Pool A. And Thursday night rugby saw New Zealand crush the Uruguayans 73-0 on a pretty strange affair. And let's start with yourself. It was an easy win for the All Blacks, but at the same time, Uruguay put in quite a good showing in that first half in particular.
Yeah, they certainly did, and nobody likes to see a scoreline like that. I've been quite critical of this on a number of different pods. It's quite frustrating, really, but it is what it is, and we all know what the solutions are, and hopefully we'll get there. Like in 4 years' time, we won't see these kind of cricket scores. But yeah, to be fair to Uruguay, I think we'd all agree they're a joy to watch, and they certainly put it up to the All Blacks in the first half. You know, they showed a real willingness to play and run with the ball. And yeah, it was great to see. Yeah, the All Blacks kept scoreless for 20 minutes. And let's not forget as well. Like I know it's a convincing, very convincing scoreline for the All Blacks. But I think that also does put into perspective how well Uruguay can play, especially against the French. When you remember that they were within 20 points of the French in that game. So I think the All Blacks were just absolutely ruthless, but Uruguay did show some class. You know, they had a lot of possession, but they just struggled to get past the All Blacks defense. And you have to say that All Blacks defense was excellent. And it's quite frustrating really because they just seem to make a lot of errors. Like they do really well and make a nice break, go through a couple of phases, and then their hands would kind of let them down. So that was quite frustrating, but it's clear that they're building, and if every neutral I think is behind them. We all want to see them do well. So let's just hope that they continue to build and they're better for the next tournament. And then like just briefly in terms of the All Blacks, they had the bonus points secured by halftime. And I think that they really did show their class. They absolutely dominated possession. I think the second half, was something like 75% possession, which is crazy. And, we did see glimpses throughout the game of their, attacking threat in Ireland. I'm sure we'll be watching. Like I know that disallowed try from Rygaard at the beginning was fabulous. And yeah, I know it came back and it wasn't awarded, but it did just show kind of what they're capable of. And there were other glimpses throughout the game as well. And how that's how they score. They're so good in counterattack, and that's what was frustrating, I think, for the Uruguayans as well. So whenever they did make those errors, the All Blacks would just pounce. And just a special mention too to Dane McKenzie. I thought he was brilliant. I could easily see him. I don't think he'll start at fullback or even at fly half next week, but he certainly, I hope he's a bench option because I think he really, he scored 2 tries. And I'm sure we've all seen those clips of that behind the back.
No, we haven't. That's the issue, and we haven't seen clips.
No, they haven't.
We saw it for like the first 10 minutes. That if you're on Twitter early, okay, then you saw it.
Wait, are we allowed to share clips? I didn't know we were allowed to do that.
Not a chance. I'm still waiting
for
my
what
Jack
Andy's
Crowley
doing. I love what Andy's doing. He's just drawing photos.
Andy has and what I love about Andy is his commitment to the cause. I thought it was just going to be 1 or 2 tweets, but he's carrying on with it. He's really pushing it. I love that work.
Yeah, it is phenomenal. And it should be said, we have talked about the clips many times, but it's just going to keep coming up until we finish. And another thing that will come up as well is, like New Zealand for 30 odd years have just gone in and they've beaten tier 2 nations or tier 3 nations by a cricket score in a World Cup. It's no different than years gone by. But the only difference now is we're supposed to have a World League that'll apparently bring teams together by closing the door in the likes of Uruguay's face, which is ridiculous, as we all know. And Sam, I might get your take on that, because like, you watch Uruguay, they put up a great contest against Italy and against France, and yeah, this was disappointing, but it feels like they're going to have to do well just to get back to the same standards in 4 years' time.
Yeah, and it's so obvious, and this is what's so concerning, is that it is so obvious for anyone watching the likes of Uruguay and Portugal, these teams that have come to the World Cup and played, you know, good rugby, and then the next match you can see that they've learned so much from the last match, and the next match and the next match. It seems so absolutely death-defyingly stupid to stop them from playing, because even in that match, as Enda was saying there, Uruguay, even in the game against a team like the All Blacks, you learn so much, and those players were learning so much. And look at Portugal. I don't want to, jump too far ahead, but look at the way that they have learned and adapted, and just how much it's working. You can see it working. You can see it happening in front of your eyes, and it is undeniably daft, and that's putting it politely, to stop these and as you mentioned, basically just send them back and send them off, and your Chiles, your Uruguays, your Portugal, your Romania, all of these teams that have come in and taken a pasting, but even so have learnt so much in that process. It's just mad. I just wish that there was someone with the foresight and the long view, rather than the shortism, the long view, to really involve these teams in as much rugby as they can possibly get involved in. And I tell you, I jokingly said, the Championship has lost a team this week in Jersey. I mean, Portugal, you fancy it? I mean, it would be weekly rugby. They would they'd probably win the blinking thing and have to be promoted to the Premiership. It would be hilarious. But, you need teams. You need to give them a go. You really do. And I hope someone somewhere is making long-term plans.
Well, even the EPCR are a self-proclaimed beacon of innovation in European club rugby, and they brought in the Black Lions 9 years into their reign. Like, that's not exactly innovative, is it? No. I will come back to that on another separate podcast, maybe during the season, but we do have a lot to get into today.
Sure.
And I will come back to you for France against Italy. France, like, they flex their muscles. Like, Damien Penaud is just, it feels like this is his World Cup as opposed to Dupont, for instance. He was stellar in his performance. But for Italy, it has been two really disappointing last two games.
Yeah, it really has, hasn't it? I've kind of gone back on this. I think initially I was kind of, and I did express this in a different pod, just saying that it felt like they'd maybe packed their bags, and how much of an impact did Kieran Crowley's, like we all know he's departing after the World Cup, how much of an impact is that having on the players? And I think I initially thought that it just seemed like they'd packed the bags and they'd just kind of given up to an extent. But after watching the game back, like, they did hang in there, and I was delighted to see them score after 71 minutes. It was a crucial try by Zulani. Like, it was good to see that. But like, just overall, and this game was a perfect example. Like, if you look at the penalty count, it was 16 penalties they gave away. They made so many errors, and so many just frustrating errors, like missing touch. France just do what France do, set it up. And yeah, it was just an incredibly frustrating World Cup in general, I think, for Italy. We all expected more. We all wanted more from them. I don't want to get into the calls for them to leave the Six Nations. I think that's daft. I think they've earned their spot there. I think they should stay. There's also never going to be a promotion relegation for me in the Six Nations. You think the IRFU are going to vote for that and risk getting relegated? I don't think so. But yeah, just overall, overall, it was very, very disappointing from Italy. But at least in this game, they did, I think they did play better. you look at the scoreline, it's that bit better. Like it's still not pretty at 67 points, but yeah, just for me, I've just been very let down by them throughout the whole tournament, and at least they put in this decent performance, if we call it that. But like going back to France, they were just absolutely spectacular. They were clinical, as you mentioned. Damien Pinot, he's the top try scorer for a reason in this competition. He's a joy to watch. Even when he makes an error, it doesn't phase him at all, which is brilliant. And this young superstar, Louis Bielbiare, I definitely butchered that. But
I think
he's
that's
such he's such an exciting young talent, and I love the way the French aren't afraid to throw him in there in the deep end, and you could definitely see him starting in the quarterfinals now. And as usual, France, they were really strong defensively as well. I think there was something like 94% of their tackles were completed. No surprise there, with John Edwards in charge. And just one really interesting stat as well, like only one try was scored by a French forward in this game, which is really interesting. So it just showed how, their backs were just, they let loose in this game, but obviously the platform was set by the pack, and Aldrit was excellent, of course. But but again, I did kind of mention, is this the best prep for France? Ahead of a box team who've been resting for 2 weeks? I don't know. And it will be pretty mad if they're losing against Ireland. So I think we're in for an absolutely cracking quarterfinal game. We'll get into that later, but really looking forward to that. But yeah, very, very clinical, and probably worrying from an Irish perspective if we can get too ahead of ourselves and think about the final.
Two things that I noticed in that game, Enda, I don't know if you saw them as well. There was about 2 minutes of Italy playing some really good rugby. They ended up scoring. And it was like, it was completely incongruous with the last sort of 2 games that they played. They just played some really good rugby for about 2 minutes. Fast ball, everything went to hand, and they scored. And I just remember thinking, what? Why don't you do that? Do that more often? That's the Italy that was, beating Wales and performing so well a few months ago, or maybe it was a bit longer than that ago. But yeah, I mean that was just so unusual for me. I remarked on it at the time. The other thing is a rest week. Fiji showed that a rest week isn't always the best thing to have, and I don't know where. And it's a question for everyone. Does a rest week work? I don't know if it does.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I was actually going to ask you, Huw, anyway, about kind of the pool and how it sets up for France, because Warren Gatland has famously said, give me a tough pool and I come second, then give me a cakewalk of a pool and I come first. Because in 2011, famously, they had to do it the hard way. They should have really got to work on final. I shouldn't be bringing it up, but with the Welshman in front of me, but like he said that before. Other coaches have a similar line. And for France and for New Zealand, there is a sense of, well, were they really tested at all since, what was it, September 8th?
Yeah, and Wales are the kings of getting hard pools. We get incredibly hard
and
pools.
Munster. And Munster.
All right. Anyway,
there are going to be multiple references to Munster, of course.
Yeah, no, I can imagine.
There's a new podcast coming out soon, I think. Anyway, carry on.
Is there? I didn't know about that. Anyway, 2011, like, even in our pool, we had Samoa, and the Samoa 2011 were an extremely good team, very unlucky not to progress. Only lost by a point to the Springboks, I think.
Yeah, and lost by about 5 points or something. It was a score.
Yeah. We were losing at half time against them. So, yes, and on rest weeks, yes, I do think it helps, just because from my experience being a Wales fan, I've seen us just get battered and battered and battered. But maybe this is why Farrell has chosen to play his first choice Ireland team in every single game, regardless of the opposition. And maybe this is why Galtier chose to play his first choice France team against Namibia as well, just to keep it going, keep the combinations going, keep the rhythm in the players. Does it? The point about Italy not being preparation for the box is so true. I mean, the one stat that I think sums it up is that Stephen Varney box kicked once while he was on the pitch, and Fusco, when he came on, box kicked once again. That is like the opposite to Springbok rugby. It's the opposite to pretty much how anyone plays rugby. And I think unless Crowley has told the Italian players to do something and they've just gone, no, we're not going to do it, that does come back on Crowley. It is like, okay, I understand maybe you want to play differently because you think if you play like France, you're not going to beat France. But like basic, if you've got Montejuani why not stick a ball up and get him to chase it? Because he can do that. It's the same with Scotland, who we'll talk about later. It's like, Duhan van der Merwe, give him a ball to chase. I'm sure he'll contest for it very well. So yeah, and then just on Italy as well, the other thing for me that deserves criticism is what they were doing with Garbisi, Allen, and Capuzzo. The way they were moving Capuzzo between fullback and wing, and then Allen between fly half and fullback, and then Garbisi between 12 and 10. How have you got here and not know what your plan is? How have you got here and not known what you want your spine of your team to look like? That's a serious question for me. I don't know whether they were trying to tweak based on the opposition, but obviously it didn't work. And yeah, in terms of the strength of the pool, the one counter to that I will say is that I think a big reason that England got to the final in 2019 was because their last pool game against France was cancelled. That's my theory. I think France was their hardest game in that pool by a long way. They played against a 14-man USA, a 14-man Argentina, and Tonga. And they had a rest week in that, and then they had their final pool game cancelled. And then they went on and Australia didn't show up against them, which they haven't done for several years. And then fair play, they had an amazing performance against the All Blacks. But I definitely think that having easier games and then a hard game cancelled, and then Wales got the bum deal out of that with a fresh France team in the quarterfinal that nearly beat us despite being down to 14 men. Yeah, so my opinion is that rest weeks definitely help.
It's good to get that take on it because it is kind of the first year of the proper rest week as well. And yes, teams like Namibia and Chile have been kind of crucified by it by finishing up early and whatnot. But it's interesting to get your take. Sam, I might just come to you on Italy as we look at Pool A in total. Like Quesada is coming in there now, and it felt like he'd be taking an energized squad who could have had a real stab at it. But over the last 2 weeks, be it a lack of cohesion, which Huw has talked about, a lack of kind of knowing what their game plan is as you've all mentioned, they have just fell flat in their face. And it's disappointing considering the 2 years they've had prior to this.
It's hugely disappointing. And, it's very disappointing for everyone who wants the whole of rugby to get better, because our arguments for and against Italy's inclusion in various different competitions come up, and you feel slightly deflated, looking at those again and wondering, because I definitely thought, and maybe I'm not alone in this, I definitely thought we were on an upward curve with Italy. And it would last because of the talent that they have at under 20s that is bleeding through, and what I thought was the spine of that team looking like it was going to be set fair for a fair few years. I don't know. A new coach coming in off the back of a really good World Cup, which they didn't qualify for, because let's face it, Italy could have played really well and not qualified, and a new coach coming in, at least he's now got a little bit of right to make some big decisions and to sort of take it forward and to have some idea of positivity, bringing it in and saying this is the direction I want to go in and how I want to do it. I suppose there is that he can. We haven't mentioned it yet, but obviously there is that whole Lamaro exchange coming off when he did, and a very strange substitution. I think in about 43, 44 minutes he was pulled off, and obviously it didn't look as though that had been communicated to him in any way or shape or form, and it was very, very strange. And I think that Crowley leaving now and a new voice and a new head and a new thought process coming in might be exactly what Italy could do with, and obviously the proof will be in the pudding next spring, next February and March, when they come back into the Six Nations and have to make a case for themselves again. You have to hope it's going to be the case, and you have to hope that off the back of what will be seen as a pretty disastrous World Cup campaign, they can bounce.
Yes, you do, and it is, as we said, disappointing for Italy. And the flip side is, France will feel they're in a good place going into the quarterfinals, but maybe there's a false sense of security. And New Zealand, I definitely get the sense of, they probably haven't impressed against a top team in over a year. So maybe they're in a false sense of security as well. Like, you don't get any more prizes for racking up more than 80 points or more than 70 points in rugby. You know, this pool is kind of, I think we've kind of touched on all bases because it went as expected. France top, New Zealand second, Italy third, Uruguay fourth. And we touched on the World League, and we'll touch on other things as we get on. But I want to move on to Pool B now, lads, because even though there was only one game for us to discuss, it was probably the pool of death. That's a debate myself and Huw have had offline about which one actually was. But the game that actually took place here between Tonga and Romania was surprisingly really entertaining, and like 45-24 win for the Tongans. I said I'd take this pool. I think the least amount of work, least amount of time for me to talk. Some people might like that. But Tonga were considerably better than they have been in previous games. But Romania, who, listen, we can be accused of it here on this podcast. We have belittled them in some regard. They have not been good. They're in a bad state at the moment, but give a great account for themselves. And the Romanian player scored the try on his last cap. I can't remember his name for the life of me, but like, to see scenes like that, kind of like Portugal, like Fiji, their wins. This is what World Cups are about as well. It's not just about what France can do when they go forward ball, you know. And I don't know about you guys, but I've been left with a sense that with Tonga, had they assembled this barbarian squad of sorts by bringing the band back together before 2023, they probably could have caused some problems, but they didn't. Huw, I'll turn to you for that one, because we've discussed this ourselves about Tonga. It's a sense of what might have been in some ways.
Maybe. I don't think they were ever going to beat the teams that they lost to. I think maybe they would have performed better. I think they gave a good account themselves in the first half against Ireland. They were another team I think didn't play in week one, so they've played all 4 of their matches without a break. And they scored 3 tries against the Box as well, which very rarely happens. They're the only team to score 3 tries against the Box in a World Cup for a good while, I believe. And Coventry's own Pat Pellegrini getting on the score sheet as well, which was nice. So, yeah, my worry with Tonga is, are they going to get trapped in this cycle of All Blacks capping Tongan qualified players, which is fine. I have no problem with that. All of our nations, of us on the call and more, have players who are qualified for other countries. It's what happens. But are we going to be in a cycle of the All Blacks cap Tongan qualified player? That Tongan qualified player plays for the All Blacks for a couple of seasons, gets a big money move to France, which is cool, fair play to him, and then sits low for 3 years and then pulls on a Tonga jersey for the next World Cup. If you look at someone like Leicester Fainga'anuku, I believe he's Tongan qualified.
Yeah.
He's now off to Toulon, I believe, after this World Cup.
Yeah.
So is he going to be pulling on a Tonga jersey at the next World Cup? And if so, he's only going to get 1 season playing with it. And you could say that Leicester Fainga'anuku walks into this Tonga team, and maybe he does. Maybe he does make them better.
He absolutely does. No disrespect from the boy, I really think he does, yeah.
Yeah, but is a world-class winger what Tonga need?
No.
I don't feel like it is. I think I was about to say a fly half. I think William Havili has been excellent for them. And I think Big Ben Tameifuna has been excellent for them on the tight head as well. But I think more forwards is what they need. They need locks, they need loose heads, they need hookers. So these flash players from New Zealand coming and moving over, which is completely their right. I'm not trying to stop them or anything. I just worry whether Tonga might just be into this cycle now of this is what happens to them. This is their 4-year period, unfortunately. So it remains to be seen. We're right at the beginning of this. Maybe I'll be wrong, and I'll be delighted to be wrong. But that's my concern.
Yeah, and just to support that point, you've pulled up the Tongan squad here and their date of birth. So Ben Tameifuna is 32. He's not going to another World Cup, you would imagine. Adam Coleman, 32, more than likely not. Lev Fafita is 34. Sam Lousy, 32. Steve Maffey, 33. Vea Fafita, 31. Sione Vaialu is 28, potentially, especially if he gets 4 years at kind of URC level where he's not playing every single weekend. Augustine Pulu is 33. How older than I thought he'd be, actually. Patrick Pellegrini is only 25, so we'll throw that one out there, as is William Havili. George Moala 32, Malachi Fekitoa 31, Peter Aki 31, Charles Pieta 31, and the former Waratahs fullback who didn't make the World Cup is 34. So that is the kind of age profile that you're looking at.
Yeah.
They are players who've been there,
That-
done that, and
yeah.
if they perform it again, great. But like you look at even Peter Aki, Malachi Fekitoa, they are brilliant, brilliant players, but they just didn't have enough time. And at this stage of their career, they probably need that extra game, which, as we talked about with yourself, Huw and Enda, Tonga don't have those games. They don't have the
Yeah,
warm-ups.
and I don't know whether I'm allowed to say this on your pod, mate, but Fekitoa didn't do much in a Tonga jersey.
No, he didn't. And he's been a slow starter for the last number of years now. He started slow at Munster, he started slow at Wasps, and it's the same again this preseason, by the looks of things anyways. But you know, if he can do it at the best league, he can do it anywhere. We'll just put it that way. Pool B though has been really entertaining. And I'll start with yourself on this one. I'll give you the South Africans just to keep it slightly more partial. For the best of ways, they've come out second. There's no Celtic conspiracy that was debunked straight away on Saturday night, and maybe it's just me and my prediction bias, but feels that South Africa are in a good place heading into the quarterfinals.
Yeah, I think they're in a good place as well. They're going to be well rested. They know their game plan inside out. They've got a ridiculous strength and depth. They've called Am in now as well. They've got a big call to make, I think, at fly half. That is going to be a really tough call. I could easily see Pollard go straight in. It'd be so tough on Libbok. I don't think I'd like to see it, but I could definitely see that call being made, especially after, just his performance. Not to single out a player, but just against Ireland, he wasn't that accurate off the tee. I think they're. I think that they're going to be stung, I think, after that Irish game. To be honest, I think that the 7-1 split was definitely a mistake looking at that game. And they are playing France at home in Paris with that crowd behind. It's probably maybe the second best crowd behind the Irish crowd. Maybe, I don't know. They have one song.
I think so, yeah.
So it's going to be it's going to be a cracking game, but I don't know if you guys can call this game, but I think South Africa have been doing well. They've expanded their game plan since the last World Cup. We see some players hit form. There have been some question marks at 10, which might be answered now. But it's still just really hard to see them. I don't know. I think France could pick this one by 5 to 10 points. I think South Africa, I think they put a lot of energy into that Irish game, and we know they didn't have to win it, and they were comfortable winners against Scotland. But I just do feel like France, the way they're going, the way they performed in the weekend, even if Dupont doesn't play, I did say it previously that I think they wouldn't go far without Dupont, but I think that there's a strong chance, obviously, he'll play. But it'd be interesting to get your guys' take on kind of South Africa's form in this pool to date, and whether or not they can get past France. Yeah,
Sam, I might throw that to you. Out of you, met of the reigning champions.
It's fascinating. It's one of those pieces of art that the more you look at it, the more you see something different, and you perhaps haven't considered it previously. You think, when you think of France, you and the way that they have been playing rugby, you can't really sort of envisage anything other than France winning. But South Africa are the type of team and have the type of mindset that could just sort of knock France off their cycle and off their spinning piece, really. And I'm trying to put it in a way that doesn't make it sound as though the Boks are purely physical, because they're not. But the physical element of their game is so emphatic at times and so crucial. And if they can get it right, which I don't think they did get it right against Ireland, and that's interesting. They've already had one go at a really brilliantly offensive team. Ireland and France are fantastic offensively. I will put a caveat in there and say Ireland are I still can't quite work out whether Ireland are better defensively or offensively. They are extraordinarily good on both sides of that coin. But the Boks have had a go at trying to work out how to, disjoint or knock off centre a wonderfully fluid and together offensive team, and it didn't work out for them. I wonder whether that will play also, that they will be trying something different and something that they can learn from what happened against Ireland, and they can take it into the French game. As I say, I can't really call it, because every time you think about it, and if you think about it in different positions, if you look at the centres or if you look at the back row, there are different bits in every part of the puzzle which make you think a slightly different thing. And everything, that sounds like I'm dodging this question, but I genuinely mean it. It is an utterly intriguing game of rugby, and I don't know which way it's going to go.
One of the beauties of this lopsided draw is we could well be treated to 5 finals, 2 in the pool stages, 2 in the quarterfinals, and the main event.
Yeah.
Like, it's.
But I saw a tweet saying it's just so ridiculous that these are the quarterfinals. They should be the semi-finals. And my point to that is they might as well be, because I think the 2 teams that win these 2 matches end up in the final. I can't see, God bless them, Wales, however wonderful they seem, and Huw, I have passed down to me Welsh heritage, so that's who I support as well. When push comes to shove, I would love Wales to make a really good account of themselves, but I can't see the winner of France versus South Africa and the winner of Ireland versus New Zealand, those 2 teams not making the final. I can't see it happening.
Well, history suggests whoever wins between Ireland and New Zealand will get knocked out straight after, because whoever beats New Zealand typically loses the next game for Ireland, bar the 91 Wallabies. So
somebody's got to break. Something's got to break.
Something has to change. That is it. I will get on to Ireland in a minute, because Sam, I want to get your thoughts, but I want to go to Scotland first before I forget. And Huw, you were probably maybe not Scotland's biggest fan, or so I've been told by a friend of the pod who is probably listening and is on the Rap podcast and Sports Cardiff. That's all. I'll leave it at that. But they came into this 5th in the world. A lot of question marks about could they finally make the breakthrough. And now, what are we, 48 hours removed from kickoff in Paris in their final game? It feels like they are in no better shape. They lost to Ireland and South Africa by 20, 30 odd points. It's been a poor tournament, I think it's fair to say.
Well, I think it's gone exactly how a lot of people thought it was going to go for Scotland. We spoke about it, Enda and I spoke about it on Pirate Pods, when we said there's nothing that we've seen from Scotland that suggests that they were going to beat Ireland. Not this year, not any year. So you speak about me not being a big fan. I had a Scottish fan tell me that if I thought there's no data for Scotland beating Ireland, I was clearly only taking into account games played since the year 2000. We're guilty. Yes, that's true.
You mean the last 20 years?
Yeah.
Shocking.
You mean modern rugby?
That is my lifespan. How?
I had another.
What
Scotland
about 1871? What about 1871?
I'll hold my hands up. I didn't look.
Remember when you needed the conversion for the try to count? What about those guys?
I also had another Scotland fan telling me I was paying too much attention to score lines and not to performances, which I said is fair when predicting the result of a rugby match. But I'm not. That's 2 interesting people on Twitter. That's not all of Scotland fans. Since you're going to throw me under the bus for my Scotland hate, I want to talk about the complete one-sided rivalry that is Ireland versus Scotland, because there's a lot of hype from one side, and the example I use is Rob Kearney on Virgin Media, who, when someone says the word Scotland, looks deeply offended that someone's even talking to him about Scotland. Like he's like, who? Who are they? Like, so I don't think. I mean, Enda said he had no doubt that Ireland were going to win this one. He didn't fear Scotland at all, and I didn't see any Ireland fan who was. I'm not making stuff up, guys. Scotland don't turn up in big games. If you want to beat the worst England team since the turn of the century, if you want to beat a Welsh team that was in the midst of strike threats, cool. If you want to beat France's B team, having been 21-0 down at halftime to them, cool. Yeah, this was apparently your greatest ever team. You finished third in the Six Nations. Wales have had bad teams win the Six Nations. Like, I'm sorry,
Almost
I'm
got a
just being
Grand
honest.
Slam.
Yeah.
No, it's a great point, because as well as that, like, there was I can't remember who made the point about it, but you know, like Scotland, I think it was Ben Nurse who's been on this podcast. You could argue that Scotland had one good game in 2015 in the entire year, and that was the quarterfinal against Australia. Didn't perform in 2019, didn't perform at this World Cup, didn't perform in 2011. Granted, they weren't as strong of a team. And 2007, they scraped past Italy in the pool stages. So certainly question marks to be raised there. We have talked enough about Scotland. We probably have talked enough about Ireland as well, but I want to get your take on it, Sam, from the outside, because, you know, Johnny Beattie was saying, and Stuart Hogg was saying, this is potentially the performance of champions, even if Ireland didn't have anything to do for the last 20 minutes. From your outside perspective, what's your take on this world number one team?
On Ireland?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they are, as I said, as I alluded to earlier, they are an extraordinary team. They are, you are drawn to them, and you approach thinking that at some point, because we are so wrapped up in this fallacy of previous World Cups that an Ireland team can't perform, you somehow think that there is going to be a crack. You will spot a fissure somewhere, and it will happen. And maybe you know, people were kind of thinking that might come forth in the Ireland-Scotland game, but it didn't take them long, less than 5 minutes, to show that offensively they were adroit and accurate, and just everyone. I mean, 3 or 4 people could have scored the try that they started with. It wasn't an individual piece of brilliance. It was a marauding horde of people who were all aiming at scoring a try and basically snuffing out any hope that you had of Scotland being in the remotest bit involved in this game. And then a little bit later on in the game, they said to Scotland, you have the ball. You have the ball for 15, 18, 20 phases. You have the ball. See what you can do with it, because, you know, you've got this absolute master of offensive, you know, chucking the ball around at 10. And they just manipulated Scotland around the park like a cat with a dead mouse. It was just like, oh, don't, they're already dead. Why are you doing this to them? And it was just so you could gulp at it. It was just, wow, this is a really, really good side. And to suggest, I get a little bit, I haven't entered into the conversation on Twitter because obviously it's a dangerous place, but anyone suggesting that this side is going to choke, I think, are badly wrong. They may get beaten by a French side that on the day end up better than them. They might get beaten by a South Africa side that on the day performs somehow in the game of rugby over 80 minutes slightly better than them. They bounce the ball, a yellow card, or whatever it is that creates or is part of the infrastructure of an 80 minutes of game of rugby. They might, but I don't think they will. And I think that they are going to stride, not walk, they will stride imperiously to a Rugby World Cup title.
That's what we like to hear. To be,
and I'm not just saying that because
Yeah.
you guys. I genuinely mean that. I genuinely mean that. I can't. France have the potential to be very, very good, and a France-Ireland final would be extraordinary. It would be extraordinary if everyone kept, you know, themselves on the pitch and it played out the way it would be. But I see the one key difference with the France and Ireland is Ireland's defence. It's sublime. It is all encompassing. It is suffocating, and it would do for France, I think.
And the cat and mouse ploy, as you put it, it's true, because Ireland, like, they barely kicked in the first half. That spiked in the second half. I think they almost doubled the amount of kicks in the second half what they had in the first, and they were short, and they were basically saying, "Come on, Scotland, run back at us." But then you had lads like Jack Crowley and Jemison Gibson Park making thundering tackles on lads twice their size, and I think people go in about physicality a lot in rugby, and I think the difference with Ireland is it's not physicality, it's intensity.
It is.
They play with an intensity and a ferocity that is just, I've never seen it in an Irish team before. And it's one of the reasons why I don't think, as you said, they'll choke or they'll bottle it. I think it'll take a better team to beat them, and because they always turn up.
100%. It is a ridiculous cliche, and shame on you if you ever utter the words that the Irish side will choke. I just don't think it's. You can see it in them. You can see it in every single one of their eyes. It's just not part of it. Yes, they could get beaten by a better side, and they're unfortunate that France are as good as they are, and South Africa are as good as they are, and New Zealand look as though they potentially might be able to throw a few moves out on the dance floor. But no, I don't think at the moment anyone is better than Ireland.
It's just making for an incredible end last month to this tournament. We'll move on to Pool C now, and to yourself, Huw, with Wales, because they took on Georgia in Nantes, and despite some injury concerns, which I'm sure you'll touch on, they had too much. It was a 4-3-19 victory. Like, job done, top spot secured before Fiji got to kick a ball. And above all else, and you have to give them credit for this, there has been an incredible amount of improvement from this Welsh team to the one that was trashed in round 1 and 2 of the Six Nations back in February.
Well, to give you a stat, there were 5 games in this World Cup where a team beat a team that was ranked above them when the World Cup started. England beat Argentina. Japan beat Samoa. Portugal beat Fiji, which we'll talk about in a moment. And then the other 2 were Wales beating Fiji and Wales beating Australia. No one said when Warren Gatland came in that his job was easier than Eddie Jones's job. And before the beginning of the World Cup, everyone's predictions for Pool C, whether they were taking the mick or not, was, it'll be Australia and Fiji, it will be Australia and Georgia.
Not me.
But
I said Wales will get to a semi-final, and I stand by it.
We've got 19 points out of 20 possible, and to be honest, we should be maybe thinking we should have got 5 points against Australia as well. Okay, doesn't matter, but we definitely had the golfing quality between us and them to get the bonus point. So I think what's quite remarkable with what Gatland's been able to do in such a short space of time is, before the Fiji game, everyone in Wales was saying, I've got no idea what the 15 looks like. I've got no idea what our best team looks like. And as soon as it was named, not all the debate, because there's always selection debate in Wales, most of the debate completely ended and was like, oh yes, that's our best team. And since that moment, it's been like, yeah, okay, no, this is the team. Yes, we've got an injury to Faletau now, who I made a claim about last time I was on this pod, and apparently it didn't go down very well. But never mind. So yes, Faletau is a huge loss for us, and we are without doubt a worse team without him. But I don't think it is a Johnny Sexton style injury for us, like if he went down and that's game over. I think we can readjust. The big discussion now with our team will be, do you bring in a 6, whether that's Lydiate, or do you bring in Shunza at 6, who has been playing as a hybrid lock back rower, or do you move Jack Morgan to 6, where he's perfectly capable of playing very well, and have Tommy Reffel, who had a very good game at the breakdown against Georgia, and have the sort of dual open side type option? I think either of those is fine. I personally would go with Reffel and Morgan. I know the aforementioned Cardiff fan hates that idea, but that's what I would do. And I think Wainwright has shown that he is going to be Wales's number 8 when we are forced to live without Faletau permanently, which is probably, unfortunately, sooner rather than later. And then it was a shame to see Anscombe go off, because I think there was a very real chance, and I think the thinking behind starting him in this game was to have him start the quarterfinal and go back to what we had with Anscombe and Biggar coming off the bench, which is what served us so well in 2019. for all of that Six Nations. And Gatland said if there's only one time in his career he wished the player was available that wasn't, and it was Gareth Anscombe when we lost to the Box in the semi-final in 2019.
What's his injury, Huw? Do you know?
His knee
Groin
again.
injury.
Oh, groin, yeah, correct.
Groin. He's not been sent home. So Faletau's out and gone. They've not said that about Anscombe. So that gives us hope. I think Costello, everyone knows that I'm a huge Sam Costello fan. He's probably my favourite player at the moment. That was his third start for Wales. He's had 6 caps, but 3 of those were really junk minutes in games that were gone.
Yeah.
His 3 starts have been England at home in a warm-up, South Africa at home in a warm-up, which was Wales's third team. And for the first 20 minutes of that game, he did quite well. And then this game, and Gatland came out and said after the game, I threw him in the deep end here. He didn't do everything perfectly, and he didn't. But I think what this World Cup has reinforced for me, if you look at plenty of other teams, is how hard it is to be a 10 at a World Cup, and how the good 10s stand so much taller than all of the mediocre 10s. So Sam is learning that. But is he ready for a quarterfinal? Is he ready to come off the bench in a quarterfinal to see a game out? I'm not sure he is. To the point where I would almost rather start Sam and bring Bigger off the bench than the other way around. But I don't think that will happen. So, yeah, it's the one day the world will be at Sam's feet, but maybe not next week.
Is it too much to ask for Bigger to be an 80-minute man, do you think?
It might be. That's the worry.
That's a big question.
I think also the other problem, Huw, with my Wales hat on, is that Argentina have started to show up, and this links obviously into what I'm going to talk about. There was, I watched the highlights, albeit the highlights of that Japan-Argentina game, and I was like, as a Wales fan, I was like, no, I didn't know. No, I don't want you to stop playing good rugby. That's not what we need. I'm wearing
my Japan jersey in homage of the quarterfinal opponent I wish we had, because
yes,
I think
exactly.
we would have I think we would have beaten Japan quite very comfortably.
Yeah, and we would have definitely beaten
so.
Argentina. Yeah, we'd have beaten Argentina, who played against England. Definitely, that would have been nice. But the Argentina that started to show up now, it's and you talk about back rows, and you talk about the areas of the pitch that I thought Wales might have ascendancy in. Some of those players in the Argentina team stood up against Japan, and you just start to worry. But as you say, we shall see.
Absolutely. I want to get your thoughts on the other game in that pool now, Huw, because listen, if you haven't seen the clips, you've heard the stories. Portugal, their first World Cup win coming at the expense of Fiji, but to the delight of everyone not named Eddie Jones, Fiji do get to the quarterfinals. Just by the skin of their teeth. Like, there's no point in denying that. Like, what an amazing game this was. Like, even at 3-0, it was thoroughly enjoyable. And just, I suppose the only thing I can say is rugby. Like,
yeah.
I said after Portugal lost to Australia, I said Portugal were very nice to watch in that game, but can they win games playing like that? Can they win the big games? And they they were true to themselves, but they showed a different edge to them that we haven't seen in this World Cup so far. They defended incredibly. It was jaw on the floor defense. Fiji, I don't know if anybody knows this, are big men. They are big players, and they run hard. And they were being stopped on the gain line or driven backwards, which is incredible. That is the game of their lives from every single Portugal player. And the moment, of course, at the end where the winger darts down the blind side and then feeds the man, he's got no one in front of him. There must have been a moment in his head where it's like, oh my God, I'm scoring the winning try against Fiji in a World Cup for Portugal. I can't believe it. What a moment for him. And Marquez, the scrum half, just nerves of steel, ice in the veins, kicking the goals, but showing Fiji what they should have been doing. Storty is a player who is going to go on and have an extremely long and profitable career in either the Premiership or the top 14. I've got no doubt about that. But the Portugal player I want to talk about is Nicolas Martins.
Yes.
Phenomenal. This guy can do everything. So I'm just going to read you his stats. I spent time doing this morning, but it was time well spent. So this is Nicolas Martins in the pool stage. 63 tackles, 39 carries, 196 meters, 5 offloads, 29 passes, 16 line-out takes, 4 line-out steals, 5 dominant tackles, 4 clean breaks, 6 defenders beaten, and 4 turnovers. What's missing from this guy? What can he not do?
And he's only
It's
24 as
ridiculous.
well.
In a really good pool as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, against very good opposition. From a Fiji point of view, speaking about this game, fantastic they went through. They tried to do what Wales did. They tried to put out a patchwork team and just make it through this game, and it backfired. Botitu is not a 10. I was very surprised to see him left on the pitch as long as he did. Teller didn't come on until the 71st minute. As a Fiji fan, I was screaming for him to come on from about 50 minutes. Fiji's attack had no shape to it. And obviously, his kicking for the touch was not what it needed to be. Obviously, he wasn't kicking for goal because Lamani was doing it. But Lamani is not like Lamani is Lee Halfpenny. Not all of his kicks looked like they were going over. No Kuravoli. I think he might still be injured. So it was 7 changes from the team that beat Australia, 7 differences, and they took Naithalevu off early, which surprised me a lot.
He had a poor performance, though, it must be said.
Did. So glad I drafted him into my fantasy team. Carry on.
Same.
But he is their guy, though. He's their Alan Wynne-Jones. He's the guy who steps up for them. They didn't kick for the goals as much as they should have done. Matawalu, the reserve scrum half, came off the bench but went onto the wing, and I don't know whether that contributed to the final try of no one covering the blind side because they had a scrum half playing wing. It might have been on the other side that issue came up. It might have been a contributor. They missed months. I think for Fiji have done well. They've gotten through this pool, and I think they have a chance against England, which we'll talk about more later. But in this game, it showed having to rest Teller what a miss Caleb Muntz has been for them. So, and this is the second World Cup in a row where they've lost to Portugal and they've lost to Uruguay, games they shouldn't have lost. So it's disappointing, but they're through. Just put it behind you, move on. Like I say, just blame it as the fact on a change team. The one thing that I want to know in the Australian hotel, were they all sat together in a big room watching the game? Were they all in their rooms? Was Eddie Jones with them? Or
I think we can take an educated guess, given the kind of dynamic that Eddie Jones has created over the last couple of months, that I don't know if anyone, not even Eddie Jones, would have wanted to watch that one match alongside him. Like, all best intentions, I'm sure he would have wanted his team to get to the quarterfinals, but that would be a very stressful experience. You know. Anyways, we will just touch on Pool C, and Enda, I'll get your thoughts on Australia, because for the first time ever, they're not getting out of the pools. And it's funny, I put up a tweet before the World Cup. I said, France, South Africa, New Zealand, and Australia, the 4 sides who would always get out of their pool. That's half a quarterfinalist, which is pretty phenomenal. Australia were pretty much, people said, no, they'll get out. Fiji probably won't beat them and beat Wales, which they probably have to do, but they bet Australia. They got the job done, and it feels like it was, maybe it's Captain Hindsight kicking in, but Australia just, under Eddie Jones, they look so far off the base.
Yeah, and Huw and I touched on this like before this tournament started. We just called out how it was such a bizarre, if anyone's to blame here, it's the Australian Rugby Union, to make that decision to drop Dave Rennie and pull in Jones this close to a tournament. And especially if you have to put this into context as well, they were a very controversial decision away from winning the Rugby Championship last year, and now look where they are. They haven't made it through to the knockout stages of the World Cup for the first time. So it's just it was a baffling decision, I think, to bring in Eddie Jones. It really was, and we can talk all day about his selection. He makes some crazy selections. So he's got a record at doing this, especially at 10. So I wasn't surprised not to see them get out. I don't like to say that, but I wasn't surprised not to see them get out. And a part of me likes to, just as an Irish person, likes to see Eddie Jones not succeed too well. But at the same time, you do feel for those players. We all saw those clips briefly on Twitter of them. You could really tell that it meant a lot to them that they weren't making through. They were all quite upset. So in that respect, they're a young squad and hopefully they can bounce back from this. But yeah, like when you talk about Australian rugby in general as well, you look at their Super Rugby teams as well, not doing too well. Like you'd wonder how much of a hole they're actually in, and is this a deeper problem, or is it just a poor call that they made in appointing Eddie Jones and changing the game plan, not selecting Michael Hooper, which I just think is absolutely criminal. But yeah, not surprised to see them not make it through. And I think from a neutral perspective, good to see Fiji get through. I know we spoke about them, but it's really good to see them get through. And what a clash of styles. We'll touch on up with them versus England. I just can't wait for that. But yeah, it's been overall a very, very poor showing from Australia. Even in the rugby championship right beforehand, like, it was really difficult to decipher what their game plan was, what they were doing in attack. And yeah, I think this was completely, this is a direct result, I think, of the decision to appoint Eddie Johnson, just to tear everything up and try something new this close to a tournament. We saw similar with Romania as well, and look how they've gone. So yeah, very, very disappointed for the players, but it's not surprising.
Absolutely.
I was going to say, I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. You mentioned about the state that Australia's rugby's in, and appointing Eddie Jones. I don't think those two things can happen at the same time. It can be in a bad spot and it can be a bad decision. They're not almost they can be separate things. And I think I said this earlier to you guys on this podcast. That group was an absolute street fight. It was an absolute street brawl. Personified beautifully by the fact that Portugal in out of nowhere were able to absolutely elbow Fiji right in the goalies, and it was they didn't take street fighters to a street fight. Quade Cooper, I think, would have approached it in a slightly different way, and they didn't equip themselves for the group that they were going into.
Yeah, 100% have to agree there. And like, the comments on social media is never a great place to be. But I did see one that struck out on one of the Stan Sport videos. I think it was of the Ireland game or whatever. And someone said Andy Farrell 4 years ago, he kept Sexton, he kept Aki, he kept O'Mahony, he kept all these lads. Eddie Jones only needed Cooper and Hooper and lads like that for a year, and he dropped them. And now you look at the flip side. O'Mahony was potentially man the match the last day, Sexton the same. Whereas when Australia needed leaders in this tournament, they didn't have them. And that's no disrespect to the Carter Gordons of this world or the Fraser McWrights of this world, but they haven't been there, done that. They haven't got the experience yet with the experienced players around them to show them how it's done. Never mind to do it themselves.
Yeah.
Carter Gordon, has played 40 games of professional rugby and won 10 of them. He finished in a Super Rugby side that finished 11th out of 12. And just to put into context, that when you get down to that level of Super Rugby, you're competing against Moana Pacifica, who, God love them, were not cut out to really compete, and Western Force, who also not cut out to compete, and they finished below Western Force. So that's the kind of pool that Eddie's chosen to draw from, just as an example.
Yeah, and just finally, on a quick word, I'll come to you for this, Huw. Georgia, many were expecting to at least battle out for third or for second spot at the very least. They finished bottom with a solitary draw to get them that, and their head coach has resigned today as we speak. Pretty disappointing tournament for them, considering they've basically walked the Rugby Europe Championship for the last, I don't know how many years.
Yeah, massively disappointing. I wonder, we might need to be talking about it as a thing now, because last World Cup they didn't turn up either. There was a lot of hope and expectation, maybe not to get out of the pool like it was this time, but they showed up in the first game against Wales and they looked like Wales were a cut above. Okay, Wales were at the time competing to be the number one team in the world in the standings at least, but Georgia didn't lay a glove on them in that game, and they kind of not gone back to that in terms of the score line difference against Wales. And I do think Georgia were unlucky-ish, but they made their own luck against Australia, when Niniashvili breaks up pitch and then chucks the ball to an Australian, and thanks very much, mate. They will be kicking themselves. They will be absolutely kicking themselves. They'll look back on each one of those games, and there'll be players who'll be able to pinpoint a moment in those games and think, at that moment, I should have done this and I didn't, and that will haunt them. And the only thing that you can hope is that they will take the learning from that. They have evolved their game massively. Something that winds me up a little bit is on the TV where they go, well, the thing about Georgians is they got a great pack and a great scrum. Like, come on, guys. They're much more than that these days. They're a different team now. And what they're doing with Black Lion, not only in Rugby Europe, but also competing in the Curry Cup and going around the world, they played Super Rugby America's teams, which is a great story. And now they're in the Challenge Cup as well. Georgia are still building. So you just got to hope that this is a dent to their pride, but not a halt to their progress. That's what Georgia have got to hope now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned this kind of trend, like 2019, apologies, couldn't do the quick maths. They bet Uruguay quite convincingly, but as many people remember, that was Uruguay who just beaten Fiji 5 days previous and hadn't the same run into that game at all, and it looked like it. So maybe there are question marks about Georgia and their ability to get up for these tournaments. We will talk about Wales and Fiji a bit more when we talk about the quarterfinals in a short while, but on to Pool D now, which was, I must say, this was definitely the most enjoyable weekend of Pool D because England, Samoa,
England weren't playing. Oh no, they did.
No,
did
they did
play.
They
No.
did play. I'm going to start.
But they
with
were on the
that.
pitch against Samoa. They didn't.
Oh yeah.
No, they scored a wonderful try, and to his credit, Matt Dawson did say, if another team scored that opening try that England did, we'd have praised them. But because we knew what was going to come afterwards, we weren't as quick to praise them, and that's pretty fair because it was poor after that. But just to give people the heads up who didn't see it, England scraped past Samoa. They were already qualified, but Sam, and I'll get you to take this pool. Even at that, short of a place, not exactly a reassuring performance.
My heart sank when I saw that I had to describe England at the moment because
Again.
because I just don't understand. I don't understand what Borthwick is trying to do. I don't understand what he is attempting to try, and other than get people on the pitch that he knows. I don't understand it, and I don't think many people do. And so it was really quite underwhelming to see them perform like they had previously. The character that we all thought England may have shaken off was back, on parade, and stalking around the pitch, like casting its shadow over everything and just making it really quite dull and uninspiring. And it's really frustrating because I thought maybe there was a way through this mire, but there seemingly is not. The only positive from England's point of view is that Fiji seem to have lost their way against Portugal, and maybe, as has been touched on, maybe there's a few positional elements to their 15 which maybe England can exploit with a well-rounded Steve Borthwick sort of tactical masterclass, he says, without really believing in what he's saying. That I think it's a really odd one. I was really pleased that was the Samoa that turned up and tried to play what it played. They should have won, and it was really heartbreaking to see that final move fall down and not quite come to fruition, because this, a little bit like Tonga, they're a side who, again, if they'd had a bit more time together and a bit more practice with the sort of people that they have on their pitch, they've got a very good back row. They've got a very industrious back line which can fire and can impress a lot of people. You wanted that. They haven't really shown themselves Samoa in this group the way that they would have wanted to, and I was pleased to see that from that point of view. But England, I don't know. I haven't got a clue. I don't know. They'll probably beat Fiji by about 15 points, and we'll all be going, yeah, this is weird. I have no clue. There's part of me that wants England to get roundly beaten and sent home and told to, go and work on something for a long time and come back when you're ready. But I still think that there's a weirdly prolonged process which is going to see them into the semi-final, which is going to buy the RFU and certain people at the RFU a bit of time, which is most concerning.
Yeah,
that's just what you said, Sam, about about Samoa as well. Like their head coach came out after the game and said it was no surprise that the fourth game of the tournament, this is the type of performance they could put in.
Yeah,
because they just had that cohesion, had that time together.
Exactly. And you mentioned it before. This is what we need these teams to have a run at it, Enda. You're absolutely right. And it's no surprise to see Tonga playing well, with a run at it, and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
we keep on saying it. We keep on saying it.
Just what I will say, to the detriment of all the people who want to see England lose, which sounds like you're one of them, Sam.
No, I don't. No, I don't. I'm invested in English rugby. I want to see England play really well and do as well as they possibly can. It would do my outlook and the outlook of English rugby wonders to see them doing well. But I don't. I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't know how. Other than drop kick their way to a title, I haven't got a clue.
As long as they don't run out of time.
That's harsh.
Wasn't that weird?
But I will say this. I'm going to say something. I'm going to state a fact which makes England look good. They only conceded 3 tries in the whole pool stage. They conceded 2 in this game and 1 against Argentina, which was right at the death when the game was already done. And they got 2 shutouts. They got a shutout against Japan, which is no mean feat.
No.
And obviously they had the game against Chile. So that's the kind of, we like to talk about zombies, don't we? It feels like a zombie march from England to a semi-final. Like they're gonna get there somehow or other. And surprisingly, Fiji have found it hard to come by tries. So far they've only scored 7 in the 4 games that they've played, which, considering they got out of the pool, is quite remarkable, really. Australia outscored them 2-1 in that one game. So that's kind of the one thing that I would say England have shown that they can defend. You can talk about this under their opposition. But yeah, as to Sam's point, the team that England ended up with on the training pit on the pitch, with Farrell, Lawrence, Marchant, and then Smith at fullback and May and Stewart on the wing. I can get the logic of that, but that was plan B.
Yeah.
Plan A was with 4 players playing out of position?
Yeah.
And two players in the back line that originally weren't in the World Cup squad and have suddenly overnight become first choice, despite being dropped 2 months ago. Weird.
Yeah. It's a point that, I don't know, was it yourself who sent it on to me, or who it was, or it's in my mentions or whatever, but like England recently just fly in the face of what every other team has been doing when it comes to cohesion and just sticking to a plan. Like I don't want to pick on the guy because I think he's a wonderfully talented footballer. Marcus Smith is not defensively solid enough to be an international fullback. Like he's the one who missed the tackle on the Samoan player in the 22 that caused them to break down the field and nearly win the game. And I understand that was a strength thing. He's a slight man, but that's the question marks you have to be asking. And on their defense, I still can't figure out whether their defense is solid because of Sinfield or in spite of Sinfield, because they do have a lot of really lazy moments, as you've pointed out yourself, Huw, where you wonder, like, well, no defense coach can fix that during the middle of a game, but then at the same time, they're not conceding a whole lot of tries. So you do have to question whether it's because of him or in spite of him that they're managing to do it. And there was another game in this pool, so I do want to get onto that because it's been a really enjoyable.
Sorry, that's on me. Sorry, I should have picked that up and gone. Yeah, brilliant. You know, you couldn't help but smile watching it and enjoying it. You know, there were 2 teams there who really looked as though they were having a great time playing rugby and scoring.
And Vakatava in particular, with the try of the year,
with fantastic.
Fiji's top try scorer. 3.
Yeah. I think again, it comes back to the point that we've already made countless times. You know, you give these teams, Japan especially, again, just an opportunity in which to eat at the same table as some of these other clubs, some of these other teams, these international teams. They're going to get better. It's good. It's going to improve things. It's not bloody brain surgery, is it? If you allow teams to play, it's like when rugby players, you know, get loaned out to a team and play 10 games in a row. At the end of that 10 games, they're really good, and you're like, oh, you're really good. Why is that? Because I've been playing, and in this team I don't get a chance. I get 10 minutes at the end of every game. I don't get a chance. This team I get a run. I get to learn from every mistake. I get week on week benefits, development. I get a upward curve. I get all the things that you want as an individual. These teams are getting it, and it's not a surprise. It's genuinely not a surprise. I thought Japan. I was so pleased to see it. I was so pleased to see them, because again, they're a side that have been on a little bit of a wane at the moment, and it was really, really pleasing to see that coming together and that working out really. And Argentina, as I say, I watched them going, and covering the Premiership. You know all about Carreras out on the wing, and you're just like, oh God, yeah, I'm so glad he scored a hat-trick. That's going to do his confidence the world of good. So it's an interesting one. It makes it, from a purely neutral's point of view, I think it makes that that side of the draw a lot more interesting to see an Argentina firing on more cylinders than they were, and I think it'll be fascinating. Really, really good.
It's promised to be, and to their credit, Argentina had shown nothing in attack since not just this year alone. Even in the Rugby Championship, they were struggling with kind of makeshift backlines being a big reason. But in this game, they clicked.
The Chocobaras run sort of seemed to galvanize everything, didn't it? It seemed to sort of like say, this is the way. I am going this way. Everyone follow. And it was just like everyone, this is great. And it was really good, really, really good. Again, it just feeds into. I'm pleased. I'm pleased to see it, because it was a bit strange watching Argentina versus England. They seemed very, very unwell. I'm pleased to see that they're feeling better.
Yeah, absolutely. That leaves us with Pool D. The other teams that were in action was, of course, Chile in their first World Cup. They unfortunately came out on the wrong side of quite a few bad results, but England top, they were assured of that. Argentina second, as he said. Japan were third.
Yeah, Japan.
Apologies,
Japan
just had
third.
a brain lapse there. Samoa fourth, and those two played out a really entertaining game as well. And it's kind of been
Samoa
the theme of this.
Themselves. Samoa massively kicking themselves. They had the talent to get out of this pool.
They did.
Absolutely. And they had the game plan as well. If they stuck to it, they had the ability of, we've seen it in the warm-ups, that when they balanced the kind of, okay, we can play from everywhere with, let's maybe just put up a couple of contestables and squeeze the life out of opposition with McFarland and Fritz Lee and lads like these who were just pests to play against. They just didn't find that balance, unfortunately, until the last game and the second half of that last game. But
the oracle that is Lawrence Dallaglio said that Samoa should have been running it from their own 22 and offloading from minute 1 in every game.
But it nearly came true, though. It nearly came true on Saturday. Saturday afternoon.
Question for me is the whole Sapawanga Leofano thing.
I
was a huge Leofano fan. They had Paiao at fullback, and he's not a fullback, and you could tell that from his kick selection and some of the decision making. For me, I would have had Leofano at 10 and Sapawanga at fullback. I think that was the best solution for the players they had. But I assumed Sapawanga must have been injured, because he wasn't even in the 23 for some of the games. Apparently, no, he just wasn't picked. I don't get it.
Crazy. They were a better team with him, and even that warm up against Ireland when Sapawanga came. I can't remember if he started that game, I believe, and he kicked the leather off the ball. He was putting snow on it, and just like, it was a really miserable night for anyone who watched it, and like it caused havoc.
Yeah,
and his tactical kicking has been stellar, and it is a pity, as you said. It feels like they've let an opportunity.
Well, and also, feed into that the fact that obviously they started a week later than everyone else, and they knew that everything was in front of them. They knew how poorly Argentina had performed. They knew it was all there for the taking. and they didn't take it. You're right. When they look back on it, they must feel pretty sick.
Yeah, it's a pity, but that's just the way it is sometimes in World Cups. You do have to question, well, maybe having a 4-game November slate isn't the worst thing in the world, because maybe that extra game could make a huge difference. But unfortunately, we know who really runs World Rugby, and it's not it's not Bill Beaumont and co. It's a couple of club chiefs more than anything, or so it feels like. Before we go, gentlemen, I know I've taken up a lot of your time, but I do want to just quickly talk quarterfinals. Just a comment on each will do. Huw, first game, Wales against Argentina in Marseille. Scotland against Czechia. It's your own nation. I've tipped them to get to a semi-final before, so I might as well stick with it. Which way do you see it going? Who's coming out victorious?
Wales are favourites. I agree with what Enda said yesterday, which was I can see it being a 9-6, something like that. I can see it being a very cagey game. Wales have the capacity to switch off in rugby matches, and if they do, there's a guy in Carreras who can punish us. We should have enough, but
confident.
This
is the confident.
If ever a silence spoke, that was a silence that spoke.
Confidence is not what we do with Wales. I can assure you, with 5 minutes to go, we will be 2 points ahead with 2 men in the sin bin. That is my only prediction that I'm willing to make.
I feel like I've seen that before. Oh no, wait, I have kind of in the opening game. So you're saying which? And would they do it though? Do you think?
We're favourites.
Okay.
Call it.
You haven't exactly won games because you've been favored so far. So I don't know if that's I don't even know what to take from that. And firstly, in a word, Wales or Argentina?
Wales.
Sam, in a word.
Wales. Argentina will make a good account of themselves, but Wales have done well to get this stage. I think they can make the semi. I think they're just to use a boxing metaphor. I think they've got their punches. They know what they're doing, and I think they can put Argentina away.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm gonna go Wales. I'm gonna make it 3.5 to 1/2, I think, because we didn't really get an answer. And our own nation will hold its breath from now until 10 p.m. on Saturday, because Ireland face New Zealand in the quarterfinal. It's not even about if we're going to win. It's can we and will we do it, do you think?
I think we will. I think we'll do it by 5. Like there are so many talking points ahead of this game. The famous review, like performance anxiety. We've talked about can Ireland get past the world like at quarterfinals? I think we all know now. I think that they're a very mature team. We all hear about and read about the atmosphere that Farrell has built in camp. It's a lot less pressure. People are expressing themselves, being themselves. I think the camp is in a really good spot. We've got Joe Schmidt versus Andy Farrell. And look, Ireland have had one up against. Like we've won 4 of the last 5 games against the All Blacks. So I think we should be. I think we are favourites, and I think we should be.
Slightly, yeah.
And let's not forget that New Zealand for me have been inconsistent this year. I know it was a warm-up game, but let's not forget the hammering they received from South Africa before this tournament. And for me, I think Sam touched on it earlier and he nailed it. For me, like we were all talking about Ireland's attack versus South Africa's defense in that Ireland South Africa game, and what we were all talking about afterwards was Ireland's defense, and that was reinforced this past weekend. Like we all remember those 18 phase that Scotland had, and Doris, like who was the top tackler for Ireland, got in and stole that ball. So for me, defense and Ireland, we know they can score tries. I think Ireland should pip this one. And look, and today we've heard that most of those injuries were just scares, so it looks like we'll probably have a fit squad, which is brilliant to hear as well.
Yeah.
So
hopefully.
Ireland by 5.
Okay, Sam, you were effusive in your praise earlier. Are you going to stand by it and say Ireland are getting to a first semi?
I'm going to go very, very specific. This will be Bundiaki's best game ever, and it will be the difference. I don't think the New Zealand midfield can cope with what Ireland are going to throw at them, and I think Ireland can cope with what New Zealand will throw at them. I don't think there are any surprises. I don't think Andy Farrell will be caught off guard. Yes, New Zealand are a particularly strong side. They've got a lot of skillful players, but there's nothing There's nothing that I don't think that will surprise Ireland. France beat New Zealand comfortably. I think Ireland will beat New Zealand comfortably.
Okay, I like it. Huw, which way are you going for this Saturday night showdown?
I'm going to be different. Before the World Cup, I was flip-flopping of who I thought was going to win it. I thought France, and then I thought the Springboks, and then I thought the All Blacks. And I'd made a promise to myself that I'm not changing my mind again. So, yes, you could talk about the game at Twickenham with the All Blacks. Cast your mind back to 4 games before that. The All Blacks blitzed the Boks. And the Boks were confident going into that game. The Boks thought, we're going to smash them here. And that didn't happen. You don't back against the All Blacks, in my experience. And I think they've had a word with themselves since that France game. But they were playing against lesser teams. Yes, of course they were. But they were playing pissed off. They were like, it's not good enough for us just to beat these. We're going to beat them. We're going to trample them. We're going to humiliate them. We're going to make them never want to play rugby again. And I think New Zealand only lose when you expect them to win, if that makes sense. And now everyone's expecting them to lose. I just can't bring myself to back against the All Blacks. If I'm wrong, hey, and I look forward to you all tweeting me and all the listeners tweeting me, telling me how wrong I was and how stupid I was and everything. But like I said, I'm sticking to my guns. I still think the All Blacks are going to win the title, and I think they're going to score 2 tries in the first 5 minutes of this game, and I'm going to be shell-shocked, and they'll not make up the difference.
That is eerily
Oh,
close.
and by the way,
to
the talk about your record about the All Blacks. Wales had a very similar record against the Boks in 2019. We'd won 4 of our last 5 or something like that, and then they beat us when it came to crunch time.
Did you beat them down there, though? Do you know? Not point scoring,
beat them
but
in
like
America.
that does
Does
count
that
for
count?
something.
We beat them in America.
Well,
like
we
you
bet them
beat
in
the All
America,
Blacks.
so I suppose we're probably counting that. So,
Exactly.
actually, I don't think we're going back that far. But anyways, Sam, Sunday afternoon, England against Fiji in the picturesque Marseille. Personally, I hope that we don't get too much rain, because no one wants to see this become any more cagey than it already will. How do you see it going?
How would I like to see it going, as opposed to how do I see it going? I would like to see it going that Fiji come out and play some absolutely wonderful rugby and really ask England some very, very difficult questions and move themselves one step closer to the 50-1 bet that I put on that they'd make the final. So I would really like that to happen. What I think might happen is that England might just about get themselves together. Fiji might still be a little bit fragile, a little bit frazzled, a little bit all at sea as to exactly what happened against Portugal, and England might move towards the semi-final. And my very small bet will evaporate into Betfair's profits.
Fair enough. And who's going to take this one in Marseille?
My heart says Fiji. I want Fiji to win, but I think momentum is a real thing, and I think England are going to win this one. Unfortunately, I think if I could just see them being put under so much pressure, the English being absolutely fired up for it. The England are 100% going to stick to their game plan. They're going to execute it, and I'm not sure what Fiji are going to do. I just think England will have too much for them. But look, it could go either way, like absolutely. And I think every neutral wants to see Fiji do well. Yeah. But England,
they're all less than one
I can
score.
just see an England performance coming in here, 3 drop goals. Yeah. And then they just defend for the rest of the game.
Switch off your ITV now if you're a UK listener to this podcast.
Whilst Johnny Wilkinson makes love to a rugby ball. Yeah, exactly.
Ugh, we don't need to go through that again, and I didn't even go through it once. Huw, you're a staunch Fiji fan and a non-Premiership supporter, so who's going to take this?
I think if both Pirate Rugby presenters back against Fiji, I think we'll lose half of our subscribers overnight. So I think I've got to stick with them. The hope, not the hope, the belief that Fiji can take is that everything that Samoa do good, Fiji can do better.
Yes.
So that physicality, However physical Samoa are, Fiji can be more. However good offloading running, Fiji can be more. So that's the hope. The question is, can the marauding zombie that is this England team just get somehow through this other game? Like I said, England aren't conceding tries. Okay, maybe they're not playing the most free scoring opposition, but Fiji are struggling to score tries. I think if there's one man who can get Fiji's head screwed back on this week, it's Simon Raioului. The way he's conducted himself recently is exceptional.
Yeah.
Really given an example to a lot of other coaches around the world. And Fiji beat England last time they played, and that was in Twickenham. So Fiji have reason to believe it's one of those where it's a bit like England just have these teams that they beat no matter what. And up until recently, it was Fiji, but no more. So I think Fiji are going to set up a glorious semi-final against France.
Can I ask a question of Huw and Enda? Which backline, sorry, which backline do England pick for you to think that they win?
It's either Farrell at 10 or Farrell not in the team at all.
Yeah,
And
I put Farrell at 10.
Yeah,
100%
I would as well.
Farrell at 10, yeah.
Yeah, that's my thinking as well.
And
If they go 10-12, do you start to get excited?
Too much
for Fiji?
confusion or something, isn't there?
it takes away everything that is good about George Ford.
Yeah.
Having Farrell behind him.
He's the impact player you want, in my opinion. Start Farrell, and then if they're chasing again, bring on Ford to speed up the pace and whatnot. But yeah, I'd start that.
and
the right
potentially, knock over a crucial drop goal. Yeah. I agree with you.
There's the element of that as well, as Enda touched on it. Like to make it to bring it back kind of to Ireland. When Ireland have Conor Murray on the bench, you have someone who's just waiting in the wings, picks the right passes, very rarely makes mistakes off the bench. He's read the game for an hour by the time he comes on. There is nothing wrong with England doing that with George Ford.
No.
With the lad with his experience, with his rugby brain. Like, what's to say he couldn't come on,
Absolutely,
put up a chip over the top, and England score off?
Yeah, he's a different package to Farrell. This is what I don't understand. He's a brilliant foil to it. But we'll see if they go 10-12 again. I don't know. It's weird.
Just what Ireland have got with that 9-10, with the selection point of view, they've either got Leinster teammates in Gibson Park and Sexton, or they've got players who have played forever with each other in Murray and Sexton, or they've got other club teammates, which is Murray and Crowley. It's a selector's dream. You can't make a bad decision there.
I'm surprised you didn't put in a best league comment there, but listen, it's fine. There's going to be enough of those on your own podcast over the course of the season and my own. Finally, Sunday nights in France. They know how to do it in the top 14 with Sunday night showdowns. It's the hosts against the reigning champions in Paris. I mean, this could be a final, or this could be a friendly of all friendlies with C teams, and we'd still enjoy this one. I think it's going to be an epic. Dupont is back. He's back in training. So that means he's going to play. It feels like I have it in my head that he plays this game and they say, oh, he's going to go for surgery and we don't see him for Toulouse this season. He ends up going off playing the sevens. Come December, I think is when that starts. I can see that happening. I think I've said South Africa are going to do this, and I feel like they will, because it's probably a better time.
In the best league.
Yeah, exactly. But I feel like in some ways it's not the best time to play France. I feel like the best time to play France is the final, because there will be pressure that they can't avoid. They won't have that for a quarterfinal, but no one is talking about South Africa. Well, not yet. Not until Razzie does something strange or peculiar. But I might as well stick to my guns, like you have already with different predictions. I'm going to say South Africa. Sam, who's taken this showdown?
Yeah, no, you can't draw it out of me. I don't know. It really will. It really will depend on the chaos of a game of rugby. As I said before, there are so many different ways of looking at this game. There are so many different facets for this game. I just can't see it. I think it is going to be. It is the closest of all 4 matches. It is the closest one, and I cannot see it other coming down to something. My hope is it comes down to a moment of skill. It's a cliche. It comes down to a moment of skill rather than a mistake, but it could come down to a mistake, and it will be heart crushingly sad for whoever ends up making that mistake. Can't call it, I'm afraid. I can't. Today, France, an hour or so, I'll say South Africa. I'm not being flippant. It literally is that.
I feel like we're all going to go that way, to be fair. Huw, who's taking it?
The Box are good. I think the Box get a lot of disrespect about the way that they play. I think they're an excellent team, and I think they've got excellent players all over the park. But it's France at home.
Mm-hmm.
It's their home World Cup, and I, as much as anyone, was gutted when Intermac went out, and now Jalibert, the way he's played in the last 2 games against walkover opposition, but the freedom, the body language that comes from France is so relaxed and so taking joy in what they're doing. It's hard to back against, but the like I say, the Springboks are an excellent team with an excellent coach, and they know what they're doing, and this is what they do. I said France a second ago, didn't I? Because I said Fiji were going to play against France. So that must be what I think is going to happen, despite the Springboks being of the best league.
Lovely. I love it. And to round it out, who's taking the 4th and final quarterfinal?
France, just about. I'll probably change my mind tomorrow, honestly. I think the Box have a massive call to make it 10. If they can slot their kicks, I think they're in with a really good shot. But yeah, France are just buzzing. And it's a home quarterfinal. And Dupont's back. He's 100% going to start, I think, like 100%. Who knows what he'll have on his head or on his face, but he'll be playing. So yeah, I think France barely. But it should be an absolute cracking game.
To make Sam's bet come true, France to get through, but to be absolutely dead on their feet by the time they play the semi-final against Fiji, and Fiji playing against a wet paper bag, and they get to the final.
It's happened in World Cups gone by that teams have played an incredible quarterfinal. Take New Zealand 2019, and hadn't anything left in the tank.
What is 50 times £10,000? What is that? That's what I'm looking to make. So
that's it for a different podcast now, unfortunately. It's too late in the evening. But gents, thank you so much for this. It has been comprehensive. It has been everything that you could have expected for looking back at the pool stages. Been good fun first, which is the main thing. So thank you so much for joining me, Sam Roberts, Enda Fahy, and Huw Griffin. I'll be back later on the week with preview and recap pods of the quarterfinal action. And as always, thanks so much to everyone for listening. As you may have heard Sam allude to, I have started a new podcast. There'll be a link to that in the description, because I do not have a hype speech ready for it as much as anything else. But if you like what you see here, please do subscribe here and there, and to the Pirate Rugby podcast, to the Rugby Inheritance podcast, to is it Scarlet's Fever podcast you go by now?
Scarlet's Fever, yeah.
Scarlet's Fever as well, ahead of the URC return and everything in between. I will have the links for as many of these as I remember down below. And if not, you can always DM me on Twitter or hit up the lads. But for now, and until next time, take it easy. If you're an Irish fan, let's just hope this week does not drag. Slán leat.